This is where we're glad we put that masking tape on the forms, as we're now going to remove them all. Actually, it's not shown here, but I like to put fiberglass cloth inside my boats as well. So this has already received the 6-ounce fiberglass cloth, and there you just see me putting the last coat of resin on. It's important not to varnish the inside of the hull. We want to leave the raw epoxy so as other parts can be glued to it. This is how I mould the floor timbers. I just have some heavy timbers laid across from shear to shear, clamped on, and then laminate the floor timbers right against the hull. So again, we have plastic underneath to keep them from sticking, because we want to be able to remove them and clean them all up. See there that the ends of these floor timbers have been cut at the right height for the bunks, so as the plywood can just sit on top of them. So as you can see, it's beneficial to do as much of this work at the bench as possible rather than in the boat. Now we are going to glue them in place, again with thickened epoxy. Mostly what I use to thicken the epoxy is colloidal silica, which is a fine silica powder, and perhaps a little bit of cotton fibre too to give it a little bit more substance. But mostly I use the silica. Just putting one screw at each end into the hull, just to hold them in place till the glue sets up, because the keel bolts are going to be coming up through those timbers, so that'll hold everything together. This is the bunks which I've fabricated in place here. Once again, going to take them out, clean them up, and epoxy them. Really can't stress the importance of doing as much work as possible outside the boat. So here now the bunks faces have been placed in the hull, and I'm now putting a fillet of epoxy to hold them in place. It's a plastic bag filled with epoxy and thickening agents, with just a little hole cut in the corner. Puts a nice bead there, and then we can go over with a nice rounded stick. This is the bunk tops. Some inspection hatches, also able to put some storage in there. Now for the side decks, you see I put a 2x8 there, got notches in it. This piece of plywood is taken from the lofting floor, not only for the curvature of the deck beams, but also for the width from the shear to the carling, which we'll see later. We can use these to mark that off. Here you see all the forms that have been taken off the lofting. We can now mark the carling where the side of the cabin goes. Now everything gets 3 coats of epoxy and then sanded, ready for varnishing later. All the deck beams in place, carlings are in. Now I'm ferring everything up, ready for the first layer of subdecking. Little BMW diesel sitting in there, all hooked up to the shaft, I believe. Simple little attachment there, goes on a skill saw to be able to scarf plywood. Underside of the plywood has already had its 3 coats of epoxy, once again sanded in preparation for varnish. This is just the first of 2 layers of plywood that will make up the deck. This is Bronzeel mahogany plywood, or gaboon more accurately. These have been nailed down with bronze ring nails, and once again the scarves will be staggered when I put on the second layer. And of course the underside of the scarf should fall on the deck beam. That way it's not visible from the underside. Now we're going to lay on the second layer. These are the temporary forms for the coach roof. Got some grooves in here to put the laths in to support the plywood. All this construction is of course just temporary framing. It'll all be removed once the coach roof and cabin sides is in place. The mast step will fit in between those two frames there. They're closer together. They're just clamped underneath to the deck beams. Starting to look like a boat here. I believe this is the first of 3 layers. So the first 2 layers are just stapled around the edges. Staples, of course, will be covered with the next layers. Sandbags on top, hold it down. This is the final layer, so I'm stapling it through temporary strips, so it'll make the removal of the staples easier. These are the mouldings for inside the cabin windows. Watch those fingers. Well, I don't know if I recommend that very highly, but I do have all my fingers still. I always enjoy this part. Frame for the hatch is laminated pieces of plywood. Be it an aluminum hatch go on there. Now this is something you might want the kids to do. It's actually the mould for the propeller shaft strut. Piece of fiberglass pipe set up in place on the boat, glued together, and then covered with micro balloons and epoxy, and then we just shape the outside, and when it's finished it'll go off to the foundry to be cast in silicon bronze. As with most things in boat building, if it looks right, it is right. This is the engine box and the cockpit floor. Bunks, quarter berths in this boat go back in underneath the cockpit seats, so there's really just a couple of small lazarettes in the rear. There we have some beefing up for the traveller. These are aluminum waterways that I make up. Highly recommend it. They work very good. The spigot at the back there connects to a piece of rubber hose which comes out the bottom of the cockpit. It's actually extruded 3" by 1" aluminum, and I just cut the top off it with the table saw, lower one edge the depth of the door or the lid, a little bit of ornamental work on the transom. This is actually Douglas fir that I'm using here, and it'll have a mahogany border. plywood or hardboard template there allows me to cut a groove between the two pieces of wood, which I'll fill with graphite and epoxy, give a nice effect. There was a time when I didn't use fiberglass cloth very much on my boats, but in this part of the world, Kenora, Ontario, the winters go down to 30, 40 below, and what happens, the epoxy can develop little crazes or cracks in the extreme cold, but the fiberglass cloth prevents that from happening. That's why I do both inside and outside. It really doesn't take much longer to do. The coamings are clamped in place here. Teak coamings. Now the fun part, get some varnish on here. I use spar varnish, put on with a foam roller and then tipped off with a brush. This boat will probably receive about 6 coats of that. This is all grip linear polyurethane. This is of course just a primer going on first. Very durable paint, but also very deadly on the lungs. For the non-skid, I prefer to roll it on after taping off everything. Use 2-inch masking tape around everything. Gives a nice effect when it's removed. This weird looking thing is actually the form for the bottom of the keel. This part will be cast in lead. So once again, making the pattern to send off to the foundry. Could of course cast your own if you wanted to. I just used 2-part polyurethane foam to fill in between the stations, and then some body filler to finish it off with. Well, this is the big day when we can roll it out the door. It's late spring here, weather's nice, perfect day for launching. Represents about 6 months of work, and I can assure you that the deck is not really that colour. It's more of a lighter cream colour. There's the owner of the boat, Jim LeCain, the banjo player. There she is, tied up beside Mentor, which was also a boat I built, 42-foot catch by Bruce King. So this was the first race that the little boat went into. Performed very well. So I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. Perhaps give you some incentive to build yourself a boat. And thank you for watching.